Alright. Hey everyone, the Castle here. Sorry that I haven't been getting any videos out and recently. I've been pretty distracted and stuff like that. Just kind of getting things together. I've been working pretty hard on X Alive because I want to break through on some progress on the structure of how I'm going to be handling the in-game creation of items, weapons, armor, you name it, all of the loot in the game is being designed in such a way that you design the loot in the game while in the game, so that it just sort of makes it so that it's very easy to mod. Anyone can download or upload their own weapons and items and stuff like that, and other people can play the game with those items if they see fit. So let me show you what I've got so far, just to kind of give you an idea of everything that I've been kind of cooking up here. Now, this is still very much a work in progress, but it was arduous as hell. Just breaking down like how I wanted to make sure that this was going to be done in an optimal way where it will feel good and also be efficient. And while the solution I have isn't perfect, it's probably the best one that I can think of at this point in time. So now you may realize that this is like, this is the level editor. I could fly around in the level editor, and I can also immediately go right down and play the game as I normally would, uh, in combat mode with inventory and the ability to interact with everything and get loot and all that stuff, just regularly play the game. But then there will be people who are on the server that will have permission, depending on what kind of a server it is, to be able to actually like go into editor mode and be able to like build stuff and move, build the level geometry and place objects and all that kind of stuff. So here's one example right here is you build things inside of a volume like this, and then the volume can be saved to a file, which is then instanced over to everybody who's on the server, and then you can place the instance of this file all over the place, using this sort of hierarchical instancing system and everything like that. But it's also possible now for you to be able to create objects like items and weapons as well. So basically, when what I do is I place a bunch of objects to make my cool looking gun. I'll have to have a bunch of new objects and stuff like that to be able to do this. Then I would click save, and it would create the prefab for the pistol prefab or the shotgun prefab or whatever, right? That file gets saved onto my hard drive, um, which I can show you right now. So see how like there's a bunch of prefabs here and stuff like that. So these are the actual weapon files, which is the stats of the weapon, and then I have to have another prefab, which is the actual like geometry, the view model of the weapon. So check this out now. So you go a little bit further with all of this. You can create the view model for the weapon now, and it's also possible to bring up this menu, and this menu allows you to choose the different types of assets, right? Okay, so characters are all the characters in the game, living NPCs, players, basically anything that moves around the world and has AI or is controlled by players as a character. Objects. Objects are things that are like level geometry, things that the player actually creates. Stuff like I built this building down here, right? These are all objects. Now some of them can have stats. They can be destroyed. You can repair them. You can upgrade them. They're level geometry that the player can create. You while in the combat mode, you don't just necessarily have to be in editor mode to be able to create these things. So basically, it's like you have access to this like creative mode, or if you have the right tools and stuff like that, you can be in combat mode or in just regular gameplay mode. I probably shouldn't even call it combat mode, and be able to actually use items to build blocks and structures and you can kind of be creative and build all kinds of interesting stuff, right? So So those are objects. Resources are objects that you use tools to interact with. So, like a iron node or a fishing area, like you'll see a resource, which is basically just an object that's in the world that will spawn loot if you use the correct tool in order to be able to interact with it. And there are plenty of different types of tools. So tools are items that are kind of like guns or whatever. They're sort of like weapons to create loot off of certain resources that you find around the world. So if you find like an iron node or a fishing hole or something like that, you'll be able to use a fishing pole, which would be a tool, and fish from that resource. Loot tables are just that. They're just tables where loot can spawn. Very much inspired by the structure that you would see in a Bethesda like Skyrim or Fallout kind of game, where you would set up like a bunch of different types of things. Input like the chance that it'll appear. Input the amount of that item that can spawn, and just sort of like based on different factors, maybe even have a loot table that points to other loot tables and things of that nature. So it's very much like the loot system in Fallout, um, and stuff like that. So I already went over what tools are. Tools are for gathering resources and stuff like that. Weapons are, they're guns, they're melee related things here. So if I type in, so right now the only thing that I have currently functioning mostly properly at this point in time would be weapons. So when I load this up, you'll see here that these are all the stats that a weapon has. Right now, I input a bunch of stuff. So like this is the baseline pistol, and its rate of fire is 0.5, so it's 2 shots per second. 1.0 being 1 second each, so rate of fire. Physical damage is 1.0, which means that everything that 100% of the damage that this weapon deals is physical. Now there's like different types of stats. So this game is going to use a damage threshold system for armor class, kind of like Fallout New Vegas, where if you have a higher damage threshold on your armor than what the weapon deals, then that weapon will not penetrate the armor and will actually, in fact, get its damage reduced greatly down to like below 20% of what it should be actually doing. So if you go up against a heavily armored vehicle and you decide to use a shotgun, each one of those pellets has a very low damage threshold. So that heavy armor is just going to make the shotgun completely useless. So you want to use something that has a much higher penetration. Armor piercing, armor piercing damage actually doesn't deal damage. It just increases your damage threshold on that on what you deal. Sort of like an artificial way of getting past the damage threshold of some armor. So if you have a damage threshold point amount on a weapon, then you might want to reduce how much overall damage the weapon does, but now it has a higher chance of piercing through tougher and tougher armor. So there's a difference. Like if you go up against people who a bunch of dudes that have like no armor on, then that shotgun's going to do way more damage than your rifle with a high armor piercing damage thing, because all of that extra damage, the armor piercing stuff doesn't do anything useful unless you're actually breaking past the damage threshold of the armor. Fire and ice and shock and radiation and corrosion are basically just different types of damage that can also add up a status effect if you deal enough of this damage to a specific target. It's usually fire damage can burn a target, dealing damage over time. Ice damage can slow and freeze a target. Shock damage also deals damage through armor, so shock is kind of like a slightly better version of armor piercing, but it's not really quite there. It can also stun targets if you hit them enough. They'll reach that sort of like they'll reach a point where they get stunned from the shock damage. Radiation damage really great against organic targets. Corrosion damage very good against machines. So the time to kill thing, basically, what this indicates is on the time to kill. Now I won't be able to go through all of the different stats, but I'm basically going through the damage system stats for now. There's a lot more going on here than just that. The time to kill is how much time will this weapon take to kill a target if all you're doing is point blank shooting your gun into the target. How many seconds will it take to kill an unarmored enemy opponent with a specific amount of health, right? And at the moment, the time to kill is 4 seconds, right? So in the case of the pistol, you will sit there for 4 seconds firing 2 shots per second into the target, and it'll take 4 seconds of physical damage to actually kill that target. All right? So I go with this system because it's easier to balance overall, because it forces you to have to think about time to kill rather than, just inputting like some weird fucking numbers. Like I'm just going to, this pistol does 25 damage per... No. That's not how I'm setting this up. One of the main things that happens all the time is that it's very easy to like get carried away with the damage numbers and stuff like that. In reality, what I want to do is I want to make sure that there's some kind of sanity. So it's a little bit more sane to utilize a time to kill methodology than it is to actually just input numbers and hope to pray to God that not one of your guns suddenly is doing like a zillion damage per second because you didn't think, it's just like a Warframe thing. Like there'll be like one thing that you can do and all of a sudden everything is just, you could just completely break the game and two-shot bosses and stuff like that. My damage system doesn't allow that to happen. So basically, if physical damage is 2, is doubled, right? So if I say that physical damage is above 1.0, then that means that it will actually only take 2 seconds to kill the target using this weapon because I've increased my physical damage percentage. So if the damage percentage added up amongst all of these things equals greater than 1.0, then that means that the time to kill is actually going to be lower than what it is currently right now. Likewise, if the damage added up through all of these different things, armor piercing, excluded, of course, then it'll actually take longer to kill the target than 4 seconds. So what you want to do when you're inputting these numbers is you want to try and make sure that they all, when you add them all up, that they stay roughly exactly where 1.0 actually is. And now you actually know, okay, firing at a target for 4 seconds, 2, 3, 4, that will actually take down that target and deal the proper DPS. So there's actually a lot of stats going on here, and I'm going to make sure that I have tooltips and everything like that for each one of these to explain what they're doing, although I imagine that it's probably, for a while, if you're going to start making your own guns, the best thing to do is actually going to be to grab an existing weapon file. So like you like the pistol, it looks cool, it has like a good view model and everything like that. What you do is you just copy this file, paste it, rename it to something else, and then you'll be able to load the new pistol and be like new pistol and load it. It'll have all of the same exact stats as the pistol before, but now you can like change a couple of things and mess around with the settings to see, like how fast do the projectiles go, like how far, what's the projectile range? It should be actually 2,000 should be the default. 2,000. Oh, there's probably a grouping thing or something like that I have to take off. So yeah, all right. Let's see. So this is a pretty good indication of like what the overall what it'll be like to make a new weapon and everything like that. And basically, once you're done making the weapon, you click save, and then you would have to go to loot tables and clear this, and then grab an existing loot table, one that already for I don't know, like let's say toilet bowls. Let's say that there's like toilets sitting around the world all over the place, and there's like a chance that you might get a pistol, kind of like in 7 Days to Die. Well, you would go to the loot table for toilets, and you can now put a pistol, a 1% chance that a pistol will appear or something like that, with you know, with in this condition or whatever. And now you've actually added the weapon into the game through the loot tables. Now this can all be done while people are running around shooting stuff and gathering and blah blah blah. I could be floating above the map, just making stuff and watching people play. And for a little while, I'll actually be able to be able to interact kind of with how the experience actually is. So while people are having a good time, like just building stuff and getting everything together, I can be over here kind of just plotting things along. And it's set up in such a way where whenever I save a new weapon or armor or whatever, it gets saved onto all of the clients that are currently present automatically. Although I might make it so that it just gets saved on the server, because the server is the only one that's going to really be using this stuff. Um, I don't know. It's possible that I might want to have everyone using the same file. That way, I don't have to replicate things. I can, you know what I mean. If somebody decides to modify the file locally in some kind, thinking that they can cheat, well, the stats that actually deal the damage and all that wacky stuff, all that stuff's only going to be used on the server. You're mostly going to just see like visual effects and stuff like that, and things of that nature. If you want to actually um, it just to make things look a little bit smoother on your side, client side. But like you're not going to be able to modify like how much damage you do and stuff like that, unless you're the server and you can affect the game that way. So armor will work the same way. Armor is like equipment that I can equip on my character. Um, there's like different types of components that can be placed on everything. Most items are going to have a special inventory where you can place what's called components. Components are upgrades for each of the different types of items. A constructor is an item that you use that the combat class. So like by default, when you're in creative mode, you already have your constructor set up where you can just like place objects in front of you, and you can place like a greater degree and greater variety of different types of objects. Um, a constructor is basically like a more limited version of a level design tool that allows you to actually build like very specific stuff. Like I can place blocks, I can make staircases, I can put walls, floors, and ceilings. I can make my own house. I can put like designs down, and for that you'd have to like craft or find constructors. Constructors are basically guns that allow you to build the world around you, and uh, that's basically that, right? So you have all like these different types of items that allow you to do different types of stuff. Constructors are for building houses and base building and stuff. Items are consumables. Items are things that you can hold that you need to turn in for quests, or items are just loot, just general loot that doesn't really have any purpose other than for crafting recipes and things of that nature. Um, Things that you collect, like you want to get iron, you want to make iron ingots. An iron ingot would be an item. You would have to get iron nuggets or something like that, and then you melt those into ingots, and you'd have to use a constructor to build a station that'll allow you to use the recipes, which allow you to do the crafting. So you'd have to have like an anvil or something along those lines. I mean, I'm just throwing out like ideas. I'm planning on having like more creative things, but like the crafting and everything like that will be very much based on like what kind of objects you can place in your base. So you probably won't be able to just walk around at crafting stuff. You'll actually have to build some kind of a forge or something like that that allows you to actually turn the iron nuggets into ingots, and then from there you can take that over to the other thing, and then you can craft the whatever, like a shotgun or something like that. You have to basically keep collecting items for you to be able to do these recipes. The recipes are tied to these constructions. So um, components are for upgrading everything, and status effects are essentially they're sort of like a temporary status effect is a temporary piece of armor essentially. That's how the engine is going to see it anyway. A status effect basically can give you all kinds of different boosts or negative effects or damage over time or blah blah blah, right? You'll see them all listed as you have one on your character. Status effects can be passive. They can also be um, active kinds of things where like your movement is slowed for a certain amount of time. Blah blah blah, right? They're essentially just it's sort of the same kind of structure that components have. They're basically the objects that are attached to your character for a little while. Status effects tend to only last a certain amount of time. Status effects are, just different ways to deal like different types of things. So, and if you look at weapons, let's see. Let me go right back to the regular pistol. Load. You'll notice that there's a on hit status effect um, thing. Let's see, where are you at? So this damage, projectile speed, blah blah blah. On hit status effect, potency. So the way I'm doing my status effects is how Dark Souls does their status effects. In other words, if somebody hits you with fire damage, they might deal a little bit more damage depending on your resistance to fire, but nothing will really happen until the bar fills all the way up, and then you get lit on fire if that bar fills all the way up. So in Dark Souls, it works that way, where you can have somebody nailing you with a whole bunch of like frost bolts or whatever from their crossbow, but it won't affect your movement speed or anything like that until the bar fills all the way up. If you allow that bar to fill all the way up, then you're going to be movement slowed for like 8 seconds or something like that. So you want to try to avoid it. That's basically how I'm setting that up. There's also the possibility some weapons will just have uh, random types of status effects, like on hit status effect, where it causes you to the target to be paralyzed, or not necessarily something that's related to the to elemental damage or anything of that nature. It's just a status effect that can do different stuff, like maybe you shoot your friend and um, it makes it so that he can jump higher for a certain amount of time or something like that. You know what I mean? Like it's just it might take a little bit though from the potency. So if this is a 1.0 and it's like uh, healing wave, it would be status underscore, right? I'd have to shoot my friend 10 times in order for the healing wave effect to begin. But when I do shoot him, it'll he'll see the bar filling up with each shot, right? So then I would probably want to pair that with let's see, with the different types of. Oh yeah, there's a bug right now where the weapon fire effects. No, small magazine size. Lock on beam. That would be like a mercy beam, like mercy from Overwatch, where once you lock onto something, it'll just continually do its effect. So in this particular case, depending on how quickly it fires, every rate of fire, it would take a certain amount of seconds. I guess it would take I don't know. It would just be a way to like actually do like a healing wave effect on the target just by holding the beam on them for a little while, depending on the rate of fire of the weapon. So that's basically how that would work. Um, okay. So with that said, there's a fucking lot of effect. There are a lot of stats. there's a lot going on here. There's definitely a lot going on here. But I'm really keen on the idea of just keep. I want to keep pushing this. I mean, this is a fucking lot better than a Revulsion. Revulsion being everything is all static. You can't add things. You can't modify things. You can't make your own levels. This game is like all about that. I want to see people building all kinds of stuff. I want to see. I want to see creativity. I want to see like people creating like all who knows what, right? And that's basically what this is. I mean, even in some ways, actually, it just even feels better than using the editor, because when you use the editor, you get kind of like lost and bored, right? In this particular case, it's very, you know, it's more, it's easier to stay enthusiastic because I'm watching the effects of what I'm doing while I'm in the game. I can get addicted to playing the game. I might play the game for 8 hours and create like, 15 guns or something like that, right? Just because I was having fun doing it while everybody was playing or something along those lines. And I can actually see the effects of how these weapons are going to play out in the game while it's happening. To me, this is a much better way to handle it. If I'm sitting here, I'm an indie dev. I don't want to be the only one making all of this stuff and hopefully balancing everything and everything like that. Really, what I want to see is I want to see like other people actually helping out and contributing and doing things of that nature and learning what it's like to try and balance this kind of stuff. So, okay. With that said, yep, this is it. This is what I've been doing with Exalive so far. I hope you enjoyed, and yeah, definitely stay tuned for more because this is coming along pretty quick.